Thank you guys so much. This is just such a privilege to be here today, to be in this beautiful space. I didn't know this existed until yesterday when I came here for rehearsal, and Bennett was kind enough to walk me around the facilities here at Liberty Station. For those of you who are from San Diego, what a treasure you guys have. It's really, really special. The other thing that you should treasure are the people that put on this conference, and I just want to, at the risk of not mentioning so many that have made my ability to be here so nice, and your all's ability to be here at all, I just want to thank a few of them real quick before I get started. Jonathan Lebo, Michelle Morris of the Design Lab, Scott Robinson, and last but not least, obviously, Don Norman. So thank you all very much for putting on a great show. I really appreciate it. We use a definition of design that says design is the intent behind an action, idea, or material object. The intent behind. I'm going to come back to why it's so important for us to talk about the intent behind an action, an idea, or a material object. One of my favorite sayings is that the role of the designer is to trigger the right response. I just feel like that's so powerful. It's not just having an intention, it's having a very specific intention to trigger the right response on the part, in our case, of our human user, or the human being that we are selling to, or the human being that we're trying to communicate with. The role of the designer is to trigger the right response. The thing I like most about these kinds of definitions, and as we talk about design at IBM, it actually leads back to, as Bennett said, for 30 years I did 3 startups. I'm a startup guy. I'm an entrepreneur. That's how I view myself. That's how I came to design. I came to design because it was solving a business problem that I had. And the business problem that I had in my first company is that I seemed to be the only one, even though I was hiring phenomenal engineers, phenomenal salespeople, I seemed to be the only one that was worrying about all of the details of how the users experienced our product. These are modern words that we use today. Back in the middle and late 1980s, we weren't using these kinds of words, but that's what I was doing. I was trying to get people to be so in love with this digital tooling that I was building that they would forgo very credible alternatives. They would actually be laughed at because they had, at the time, computers on their desk, right? So the experience had to be so compelling. I came to this from business because when I stumbled on to the people that were doing early work in the late 1980s around persona-driven development, and then stumbled onto some of the folks that ended up merging and forming IDEO around this notion of design intention and design thinking, as it came to be called, it blew my mind because it solved the problem of how you scale this correct intention. Design to me is about scaling good outcomes for business. That's exactly what it is. No business cares about design as an abstract thought. And that's what I really want to talk to you about today. I'm going to tell you some stories about how we're thinking about design at IBM. But I think more fundamentally and more universally, these are things that may help you in whatever size of organization you are, or whether you're in the commercial sector or the public sector. I'm often asked how you communicate the value of design, right? I've told you those stories about kind of what design is, but those are still too abstract. And everybody always says, how do you communicate the value of design? And what they're asking me for is some number, if you pay $50,000, you'll get back $100,000. But that's impossible to do. The other thing that's very interesting when I talk to people about how you communicate the value of design is I always tell them this: you have to change somebody's mind. If you reinforce what they currently think about design, they will, guaranteed, not invest any more than they already invest. So when you think about how you sell design to somebody who's not investing in it or not investing enough, you have to start with the premise that you have to change their perception of what design is. That is the foundational element of selling the value of design, is changing somebody's mind. Again, this is a business concept. It's not a design concept. The great thing about it is it takes about 1 millisecond to change somebody's mindset. I wish all of you all had, a lot of you have notepads. I wish you had little bitty Post-its because then you didn't have too much space. I wish you had the correct medium Sharpie so that the lines were thick enough that you couldn't spend too much time on this project. But I want you all in your heads, just for a thought experiment, to do this. I want you all to design a vase. Design a vase. Usually I give you 3 minutes to do it. I'm just going to give you a few seconds. You all are smart people. This is a smarter than average audience. Now, here's the thing. I don't even need to look at what you drew because it looks something like that. Right? Now, design a better way for people to experience flowers in their home. Now close your eyes. Design a better way for people to experience flowers in their homes. If you're like all of our business people at IBM, your head kind of just exploded. And I guarantee you, and we now would spend about 20 minutes going around the room asking people, now show me your Post-it note and tell me about your experience. And I mean, now the creativity starts. And now, you know, it's a thing in my window, and it has water piped into it so that the flowers get sun, they get water all the time. For me, it was always 1-800-FLOWERS. That's the best way for me to experience flowers in my home. Wow. But all of a sudden, people now start to understand, wait a minute, this thing called design is not what I thought it was. It's about thinking about the person on the other end of the line and how they want to experience something. Mindset changed. Job done. Now they start going, I want good user experience. It's impossible for me. Please raise your hand if you are interested in delivering a crappy user experience to any of your customers. Now, none of you are. And now you know that design has something to do with that. What was interesting as we started our program and we started to invest in these early designers is we were all over the map. We had a bunch of designers that were designing all sorts of awesome stuff. And by the way, we had all sorts of engineers and all sorts of product managers and all sorts of business leaders. We were all designing all sorts of better experiences. We could come up with better experiences till the cows come home. There were millions of better experiences that we could do. Unfortunately, we didn't have millions of people. We only had 380,000 people. And so we started struggling with this notion of what is an experience? Because we were being way random. And there was no way for us to actually focus on the experiences that mattered. What experiences matter? I will tell you, the only experiences that matter are the experiences that differentiate your service in the marketplace. You can go to any company that delivers great experience, and I guarantee you that all the experiences that they deliver are rooted in differentiation in the marketplace. It's not good for good's sake. It's good because it allows me to trigger that right response, which may be a sale, it may be more citizen engagement, it may be whatever. So we spent a long time working on this, which we tend to do. We have a great program team at IBM. We started using design thinking on answering this question. We started doing user research. We talked to people. We said, what is your great experience? And people would start giving us a bunch of mumbo jumbo. They'd start going, well, a great experience is when I love it, you know, when I really like that thing, you know, I love, what does that mean? Like, I don't know, how do I build for that? And it was very interesting. We started asking people. We realized after about 6 months of this, it takes us a long time sometimes, that I had to ask a different question. And I started asking, tell me specifically what was the last thing you did that delighted you, or something that delights you over and over. This is mine. I love getting a new iPhone. By the way, I'm setting my alarm tonight, 12:01 a.m. And once again, I'm going to be trying to get one of the first iPhone Xs. But I love this experience. You open the box, and the box is perfect. It's the exact right friction. And once you get that top off, it's just the phone. And then the film on the phone, you unwrap the film on the phone, you touch it, you feel it, and then you kind of start digging down and you know what's underneath there. I love that experience. The first time I get my iPhone, it's probably my favorite iPhone experience every time. That's why I get one every year, probably just for this experience. Other people have different great experiences. You can talk to some people and they say, I've had my BMW for 7 years and I still love driving it fast through the Black Forest or wherever you might be. Everyday use. We started cataloging all of these things that people talk to us about, and we started looking in the marketplace at where we succeeded and where we failed very specifically. We spent a long time, and we actually, as we tend to do, we came up with a framework so that we could scale these concepts and communicate these concepts more concretely to people that didn't quite understand them. And we came up with what we call the essential experiences. I'm gonna walk through them here with you in just a minute. But understand that even these essential experiences are a work in progress. We think these are the essential experiences that you can apply to literally anything in the world. A service, an event, a product, whatever. And there were 6 of them a year ago. We now have a grid of 9. There may be 11 a year from now. There may be 7 a year from now. But here they are. The first it's this notion of how you define value for your thing in the marketplace. And we've come up with 3 experiences that we think are pretty universal. One is how people explore. How do you discover something? How did you all discover this conference? How do you explore for the right cold remedy when you walk into Walmart or Walgreens or whatever, and you see 4,000 of them? How do you actually explore to the one you want? Which one fits you? How do you evaluate those selections? And finally, how do you commit to using them? In the case of a software product, that means buy it. But committing to a process. How do you commit to something? And then how do you get started with it? What's the box? What's the unboxing experience? What's that first time use? What's the regular use experience of your service or offering or event? How do you get help? How do you upgrade it? How do you get to the next level? Is there an ability to get to the next level? How do you integrate it into other things? In a software world, this means APIs. In an event, it may be how do you take away things? And finally, how do you stop using it? This is the experience that very, very few people actually think about. We've done a lot of work to deliver a very rich set of information around these 9 essential experiences. This is just a couple, and for each of these experiences, we've actually started thinking about what happens on both sides of the experience. On the left side of this screen, you start to see how the user is feeling. Just help me get going right away. And then hopefully the tone of how we actually enable that experience. Here, we'll show you the ropes. It's easy. Come on in. For ending use, let's not make this painful. It's me, not you. And for us, hopefully what we say is we'll see you next time, and we'd love to have you back. I think one of the greatest end-use experiences that I've seen is the Netflix end-use experience. When you cancel your Netflix account, you get a really nice email, and they say, we'd love to have you back. By the way, we're going to keep your account and your data around for a year, and if you ever come back in that year, it's like you never left. I just think that's a beautiful, and somebody thought about that. That's a well-designed stop-use experience. When we get into the areas of hardware or physical spaces, we start to get into topics of sustainability that we never explicitly at scale addressed, at least in our company. So we use these experiences as a way to really make concrete how we're thinking about designing and what the role of design is, and ultimately what the value of design is. What I'm going to show you here is how we've integrated those 9 experiences, the essential experiences, into a tool. Now this has sample data, But we're actually mapping, and again, we do this for events, we do this for user journeys, a jobs to be done approach, and we do it for offerings, where we actually start to map essential experience by essential experience how we are doing versus our competition in the marketplace. Now, this is a kind of fascinating graph. This is all sample data, but right here, the blue line represents us. And right here, you can kind of see that us against these fictitious competitors, none of us is necessarily doing a very good job in that explore phase. It's hard for people to find any of us. You'll also see that we kind of have a gap in that regular use phase. All of a sudden, we're having a very interesting business conversation about what to do next. And we're having a very concrete business conversation about what to do next about experiences. We're not having a business conversation about what should be in the drop-down box. We're not having a business conversation about what feature or function should be there. We're having a business conversation about the thing that matters, which is how people are experiencing our product and how they're experiencing the differentiation of our product. Should we become best in class at exploration, knowing that we're going to drop off in everyday use once people actually commit to it and start using it? Maybe by that time we will actually have been able to focus our resources on that problem. Or should we go close this gap first? Right? It's a business conversation around experience that I've really never seen happen before. Tell you a story about a very recent way that we're actually implementing this. And it's kind of interesting. The project team brief, this was in our systems group. Our systems group that makes chips. These are called Power 9 chips, and they power computers in very large data centers that people like Google or Amazon or IBM run. They have thousands and thousands of machines, and the updating of these machines, whether it's for security updates or any other kind of updates, software updates, is a huge challenge. And so we put a team of brand new to IBM designers, most of them direct out of our boot camp, which means they came direct out of university into a 3-month boot camp, and then were handed to IBM Systems Power 9 group, and they were told, we need a single-click update. Now, I just want to do a poll real quick. How many of you all trained to be designers? How many formally trained designers are here? Okay, a little more than I thought. I'd heard about 40%, looks like about 50% of the audience, formally trained designers. Now, which of you all went to design school to go work in a Power 9 chip unit to build a single-click updater? What? This is interesting stuff. Needless to say, our design team was a little discouraged. But they did what designers do. They started thinking about this definition of the intention that exists behind the action. Why do you need a single-click updater? And because we practice user-centered design, they knew that they had to go out and actually talk to users. And so they did.
And the most difficult stuff for me was to get information and see all the pieces, how they belonging together to do proper planning.
Meet Jack. Jack was one of 30 users that the design team interviewed. That design team had 2 researchers, but the entire design team and also one of the distinguished engineers that was on the project actually went out and somewhat begrudgingly gave these designers access to real people in the real world that were really running data centers, not proxies for it, and they talked to people like Jack. And what Jack said overwhelmingly was, the last thing I want is a one-click updater. I don't know what's in the update. I don't know if I can trust it. I don't know if you've had other clients install it. By the way, I need to communicate with my manager about when the update's going to happen, and my manager needs to communicate and coordinate with the business when we can have downtime, and I need to understand whether it's going to be a rolling update or whether it requires a reboot. Don't give me a one-click updater, because even if I used it, it would simply exacerbate my problem. Oh, that's interesting. All of a sudden, we have human beings with human needs. Now, my guess is all of you went to design school to solve those kinds of problems. So these designers really got in the thick of it. We created 2 personas for this release, one Jack, one Jill, and 2 hills. You're going to learn about hills in just a minute. The first one, Jack, a lead admin, can make informed decisions on if, when, and how to use or how to patch his systems because he knows exactly what patches are relevant. And Jill, Jack's manager, can share patch status and a patch plan to gain alignment among all the affected stakeholders. These are human problems. These are human jobs to be done. This has nothing to do with one-click updates or the old notions even of HCI. And so we started iterating. We moved from sketch, iterated on the sketches up to the high res, and this is a picture. I'm not going to bore you with the details of this, but my guess is when the people started the work of what is a one-click updater, my guess is the last thing they thought is that they would be getting into a rich environment that actually helped these people manage their daily lives as opposed to a one-click update of software firmware. This is a beautiful project. We also, by the way, integrated mobile. Who would have thought that mobile would have come into play?
It was everything and a little more that I think I was hoping to get out of it.
Agree, guy. It even on one of the servers we were looking at, it caught a mistake of mine that I actually thought I'd patched this box with the rest of them, and it was a revision behind it. So that was super to be able to see that. We don't have anything like that with a dashboard that shows us a complete picture.
Huge success in the marketplace. This is the team of designers that actually created Monocle. The star of this story, though, is not the designers. It's actually Carl. This is Carl Burnett. Carl's a distinguished engineer. Carl has been in our power systems group for 2 to 3 decades. Carl thought, and he does, in fact, know the domain and the users. But it's hard to understand the biases that you bring unintentionally to these problems when you've been in them so long. And today, Carl says engaging our stakeholders at the beginning instead of the end. Our history, by the way, many of you probably heard this or experienced this, is design something you do at the end, make it pretty before it goes out the door. Carl has now completely changed his mind. You can feel the emotion coming from these users. It was really powerful. It took a millisecond to change Carl's mindset. It took a little bit longer to actually show him how to act on that new change. And now he's a believer. I want to go back to the beginning. That's where we are today. That's how we're practicing today. When we started, it didn't look that pretty. We had to look around in 2012, which was when we began to work on our reinvigorated design program, and we were delivering outcomes to the marketplace that were not that delightful. They weren't bold, and they certainly weren't getting out there very fast. And we knew we had to change that. We had to deliver experiences that our users loved, and we had to figure out how we would institute a sustained culture of this user-centered agility. And so we created a formula for how to do this. We believed that in order to generate those outcomes, it wasn't enough to change on what we were working on. We actually had to change how we do it. And we had to figure out what is a proxy for culture. Once again, you can use this word culture. I have to change the culture, I have to change the culture. What does that tactically mean? We broke it down into 3 things. We think we had to change our people, we had to add some new ones, we had to change everybody else. We had to change our practices that those people did, and we had to put them in places that actually spurred this new level of collaboration that we had to achieve. This notion of radical collaboration and radical transparency, we believe where you do something, the space that you do it in, is equally important to the people that are doing it. And we didn't have those kind of spaces at IBM. So this was our formula, and as we started, and I'll kind of roll forward to the punchline right now. The numbers have updated since the end of 2016 a little bit. Today we have 1,600 professional designers at IBM. About 900 of these designers are working in our product spaces. About 700 or so of these designers are working with clients on custom solutions through our services group. We have designers across each of these, broad buckets of skill sets: visual design, UX, industrial design, and design research. I will tell you that the inserting design researchers into the organization and into the design team has been by far the most disruptive to the company, the most misunderstood, and absolutely the most transformative of the designers that we have brought in. Monocle, for example, the story I just told you, that is a story about design research. And so about somewhere between 20 and 25% of our designers are actually design researchers. Many of them are trained ethnographers, but we're out in the field, we're observing those folks. We do one other thing when we bring people in. We actually, we developed a curriculum of a 3-month boot camp for our new designers. As I said earlier, we chose to hire 2/3 of these designers directly out of university, and it's just been phenomenal for us. It's been a phenomenal shot in the arm for IBM. It's also allowed us to really accelerate the culture that we wanted and we felt like we needed, and to accelerate the transformation of IBM. I just want to highlight one of the things we do in that boot camp. We don't, in that boot camp, bring them in and reteach them the design skills that they learned at design school. What we try to do is teach them the things that they need to be successful at IBM and in business in their career. We do a few things to do that. First of all, we're working on real-world projects, and they're actually begin to work with people that are not designers. It's very funny. We talk about multidisciplinary teams when we go out to design schools, and a lot of times, it's changing now, but in those early days of 2013 and 2014, they would say, oh yes, we have industrial designers with visual designers. It's like, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about designers with hardcore computer scientists and engineers, with people from IBM Research, with product managers making business decisions, and with users that are out there getting a job done that they've never been around. We are not our users at IBM. We're a B2B company, and so very few of us, if any of us, have ever managed a data center with 3,000 computers. But we have to build the tool that does that. And so one of the things that we really try to do, in addition to introducing them to all of these disciplines that they're going to be working with and giving them real-world projects that we can mentor them with over that first period of time, is we also begin to give them a framework for how they should be thinking about themselves as business people, as people in business, as people that have to get differentiated outcomes into the marketplace. This is one example of that, where we introduced to them a book list that I've put together that talks about 4 different things that I think are important to somebody who is being inserted and doing design. For all of us designers, change management is job 1. Changing mindsets, getting people to understand the value. These are things that are built on tried and true practices from the business world that we can leverage that we typically don't leverage. And so our business books are all about people who I think have pioneered concepts in business that are fascinating. I'll just give you an example. Alfred Sloan, the head of General Motors, the thing about this book that's fascinating, first of all, it introduces you to way more financial statements than you need to understand. But what's fascinating about Sloan is he was the person that started to understand product lines. And he started to understand the used car market. He was the first person that understood that we need to hit price points in a marketplace. And by the way, one of the price points is so low that price point has to be filled by used cars. And when you create a market for used cars, you now open a market for new cars that people need to buy. Fascinating person that designed an entire business model that's one of the biggest industries on earth. Leadership and character is something that we really strive for. At any enterprise, or as you're dealing with any company at scale, we really try to insert these abilities to hold your own with people that have a lot more domain expertise than you might. And finally, I'm going to talk about communication. This is something that I think in general our institutions are not doing enough in, is to teach our people in general, but designers specifically, how to communicate their point of view. You have to be able to articulate an argument so that you can get your point of view across to people that may not have your point of view going in. That is a skill that can be learned, and we spend a lot of time on communicating. It's a core part of how we think about design at IBM. Today we have 44 IBM studios. The newest is Washington, D.C., which serves the public sector globally. I was just there last week opening it, and that's where our designers live and work, and it's where we practice design. But at IBM, design is a little bitty dot in about an ocean of about 380,000 people. And that's really why the set of practices that we put together became so important. The magic trick of our program is that it's actually not about the designers. It's actually about everybody else. Now, don't tell anybody that, but that's the magic trick. Everything in our program is built around that word called outcomes, and it's built around the teams that generate the outcomes. We don't go around IBM evangelizing design as anything good in the abstract. We don't go around IBM evangelizing IBM design thinking as anything good in the abstract. What we do is we insert designers and we insert the practices around IBM design thinking into project teams that want into the program, and then we hopefully celebrate the great outcomes of those teams. IBM design thinking rests on three fundamental principles. First of all, user-centered. Second of all, it's built around a more intentional notion of how we form teams. In the past, before the program started, a team was literally some set of people in some organization. Here they are. Here's the new team for this project. We've gotten to be, or we're trying to be, much more intentional about who is on a team, with a particular emphasis on diversity. And when we talk about diversity, we're talking about diversity in all of its forms. Certainly gender diversity, but also racial diversity, also cultural diversity. Most of our product teams, most of our project teams, I should say, are actually around the world. We actually want to more intentionally include people from around the world in building our products. We have evidence that I will tell you, teams operate faster and they deliver better results when they are more diverse. It's just a truism. And so we have become much more intentional about how we think about teaming. And finally, this notion of the loop, this notion of restless reinvention. I want to spend just a second talking about that. We've all got our articulations of design thinking. When we started, we used one that was fairly prevalent at the time, and it showed words like understand, empathize, prototype, iterate. And it turned into quite an interesting thing that happened. And it happened on both sides. It's not just the non-designers that have fixed mindsets sometime. Our design researchers would be dropped into a team that was building something that had to get to market, and the design researchers would start going, stop, stop, stop. You don't understand your users. I understand your users. Stop. Well, the engineers and product managers were over here going, excuse me, A, I do know my users, right? So I'm insulted. And B, what do you mean stop? You're taking me back to waterfall. And we're on Agile. And they were right. They weren't right because we all know that design thinking can be applied in any context, but they were right that that was their perception. And they said, look, even when you put it on the screen, I've got to understand before I can move on. And the researcher goes, yeah, we got to go understand before we move on. And it was very interesting. We spent 2 years trying to struggle with this. First of all, we tried to do it through argument. And on the designer side, I would get my researchers, and I would say, are you ever going to understand any human being fully? Well, of course not. Well, in that case, we're just arguing about how much, right? So today you understand 1%. Go with your gut for 99%. Tomorrow you'll understand 2%. Next week you'll understand 4, then 8, then 16. And over time you'll build up the domain you need. But you can't stop the machine just because you don't fully understand. And on the engineering side, we would go argue and say, we don't have to fully understand, blah, blah, blah. But it kept coming back to that original mental model that we incepted into their brain. It was a waterfall mental model. So we spent a long time, as we tend to do, thinking and probably overthinking. But it was interesting. That's how we came up with the loop and this notion of it's observing, reflecting, making, reflecting, observing, reflecting, making. It's a constant loop. And at some point you commit, which means you release your thing to the market, and then you keep going through the loop. It was really interesting the moment that we introduced this into the lexicon, things changed. We're not our users. We get out there in the field, we observe what we can observe. In this case, we try to mimic what it means like to have low vision. We've started to insert frameworks around these three concepts of observing, reflecting, and making. The first one is a thing that we call sponsor users. At a company like ours, we have to worry about IP, and so when we actually start co-creating with users around a product or a service or an event, other companies and our companies and lawyers get involved. So we've actually created a program around this where it makes it very easy for teams to start doing research. We've also found that ideas are really easy, but aligning is really hard. We've got teams in all shapes and sizes. We've got them in all continents and what have you. And so we've inserted this practice. Well, obviously, and we sketch and prototype, and we gain alignment in that way. But where we get the broad-based alignment, I'm not talking about the scrums of the execution team, but the broad-based alignment across many stakeholders around the company is through these things that we call playbacks. And this is where our communications ability really comes into play. We use design as a forcing function to align broad sets of stakeholders up and down the tree, all the way up to our chairman and across the organization. It's the design-led playbacks that drive that alignment. So a playback is about a broader set of stakeholders beyond just the execution team that's actually building something. And finally, my experience, whether it's with my 30-person company or now a 380,000-person company, is that this notion that all teams should be small enough that 2 pizzas should feed them is a bunch of bunk. There's nothing good in the world that's been generated end to end. It's not a humble thing to say that a certain small set of people did something. A conference like this, I don't know how many dozens of people it takes to pull this off, but it's a lot. And a product at IBM, sometimes it takes 40 or 50 people, sometimes it takes 400 or 500 people. Today we have people working on quantum computing on every continent, and it's hundreds of people around the company. How do you get them aligned around experience? So we've come up with a specific construct that we call hills, and a team is working on 3 and only 3 hills at any given point in time. A hill has what we call a who, a what, and a wow, and all of these are implementation-independent statements. For example, a procurement manager can change buying strategies based on global market conditions as fast as social media reveals them. You saw the hills from the Monocle project earlier. These are things that broad groups of people can align around without getting you bogged down into particular technologies or particular implementations. There's a ton of freedom of how to take this hill, but it's specific enough that you should know when you've taken it. Our mission when we started this project in 2012, and our first cohort came in 2013, our mission was to create a sustainable culture of design and design thinking at IBM. 2 concepts there. The first one is this notion of at IBM. That's a scale question. And as I said before, we've come a long way on that journey. We arguably are employing more designers than anybody in the world, with about 1,600 practicing every day. We have a studio network that's probably the largest in the world. We're also doing some very good work, which is even more important than the scale question. But the one that keeps me up at night is this notion of sustaining, and a sustainable culture of design and design thinking. So I want to just give you a brief insight into a couple of things that we're doing, as you all might do, as you think about how you can start to think about sustaining a culture of design at your organization. The first thing that we had to do is we had to create very explicit career opportunities for our designers. In the past, it was just you're a designer, but you weren't really an engineer. We had specific career tracks for these other things. We worked for almost 2 years with our global HR organization, and we created a very specific design career ladder for our designers that allowed designers to move up either a technical track as an individual contributor all the way up to the executive ranks, or to become a business leader and come up through the business track. We spent a lot of time thinking about where in the organization we had to have designers. We started here by empowering teams in our product area. We then started to get young executives, young meaning lower level executives, in our product areas, as well as moving it into our services area and into internal employee facing. And today, this is where we are on our journey. We made our first IBM Fellow, which is the highest technical appointment at IBM. There's 190 or so fellows in the history of IBM. This year we have our first formally trained designer as an IBM Fellow. He's one of about 90 active fellows at IBM. And we have a dozen or dozen and a half directors. We have 4 distinguished designers, which is the technical track that would ultimately lead up to Fellow if they made it. And we are starting to move design in not just into how we work and how we deliver, but also into how we sell and how we relate to our clients from the beginning. Today, one aspect of my team has this as their hill. Every IBMer can follow a curated journey to become a badged IBM design thinker. We instituted an open badging platform this past year, the first badge of which is about 2.5 or 3 hours of digital onboarding to get it. That is for somebody who is working on a team with other people who have higher level badges. So you can't just watch a course and then go say you're doing it. But if you're on a team with somebody who is a coach or a leader, then you can actually get enabled digitally. The other 3 badges up the line are actually qualitatively assessed through a crowdsourced, we have 50 now chapters, 50 chapters of IBM design thinking around the company. And we've come from 7 teams in that early year of 2013 to literally somewhere between 400 and 500 teams today and 90,000 badged IBMers. As I said at the outset, in the past, IBM changed what we were working on when we had to transform over our last 100 years. Today, we're changing how we work. And I think it will have a bigger impact than any of the other transformations that we've been through. This is what a team looks like at IBM. That may be surprising to you. It would have been a picture from a far away future if I had shown this picture to ourselves in 2013. And it finally culminated last year when our chairman at South by Southwest said design thinking is at the center of IBM's transformation strategy. This started 2012 with what looked like a fairly daunting task. We started fairly small. We had big ambitions. But the thing that we kept coming back to is that we knew that it only took 1 millisecond to change somebody's mind. And if we capitalized on that next millisecond, and if we then taught them how to execute, we knew we could get to where we are today. We're not finished, but we're better than we were, I guess. There you go. That's the end. Thank you.